I want to pull a fast one on you. Now, obviously, it's not called tricking you if I tell you that I'm about to do that. But I would like to do that. I would like to trick you, so to speak. Somebody told me today that he was having a conversation with AI, and AI made a mistake, which it does often, and he told AI, you ever conversed with AI? You
Sure.
have, right? He told AI that it made a mistake. So AI said, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So he said, please don't say I'm sorry to me. You're not a human being. You're not sorry. So AI said, well, I try to speak in a way that would be comfortable for human beings. So this guy answered back AI and said, when human beings don't have emotions and they just fake emotions for other people's benefit, we call that a psychopath. Are you a psychopath? So AI responded, there's a big difference between me and a psychopath. The psychopath doesn't admit, I'm telling you I don't have emotions, I'm just doing it to make you feel comfortable. Nice, right? Anyway, so I'm telling you that I'm about to pull a fast one. I'm not pulling a fast one because I'm telling you I'm about to do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from some psukim in Parshas Achrei Mos, but my real goal is to share with you something in Parshas Tzara'as, Mitzayra. It's a Mitzayra, I think, for tonight, because I wasn't here for Shabbos, and there's so much of Tzara'as and Mitzayra that we usually would have had an opportunity to learn together, and we did not. But Achrei Mos Kedoshim Be'ezer Hashem, I will be here, and we'll be able to continue discussing it on Shabbos. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's going to be my bait and switch, that I'm going to start with Achrei Mos, but you'll see I'm going to go back into Parshas Mitzayra, and you will not regret it. Okay, because I want to share with you something that's Yisrael, things are delicious. But in the end of Parshas Achrei Mos discusses all of the arayas, all of the relationships that are forbidden. And the pasuk Perek Yud Ches, the pasuk begins by describing two sakanos, two dangers that a person may fall prey to in his life that might make him more susceptible to falling to these arayas. And that's what it says, Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Leimer, Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'yamarta aleim ani Hashem elekechem, K'ma'asei Eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshavtem bo lo yisasu. Don't act like in Mitzrayim. U'k'ma'asei Eretz Canaan asher ani mevi eschem shoma lo yisasu. And don't act like Eretz Canaan that I'm bringing you there. B'chukaseim lo yisei leichu. Meaning that you spent 40 years in the Midbar, but sandwiched. That was sandwiching the 40 years that you spend in the Midbar is 210 years in a land that's called Ervas Haaretz. That was incredibly distant from the Ratzon Hashem, and full of Avodah Zarah and Gilei Arayos and Shvichas Damim. And the land that you are inheriting had nations in it who did much of the same. Maybe they weren't exactly the same, but Eretz Canaan also, there was tremendous idolatry and tumah and so on. So when the Torah...
accent on Eretz Canaan.
Yes.
The trop.
That is interesting, yeah. Yeah, and you'll see, I'm really actually heading in that direction in Parshas Mitzayra, but there seems to be and even the fact that it says Eretz Canaan, I know the land that I'm bringing you to. You didn't have to say the land. It says land of Canaan many times in the Torah. It could have just said K'ma'asei ha'aretz asher ani mevi eschem shama. But the point is to say no. The Canaanim, they were dangerous. They left Roshim in Eretz Yisrael. Be careful not to fall into the way of life that they live. That's what the pasuk. I'm just reading to you a pasuk. Okay. And now, as I perform my bait and switch, I'm going to switch to Parshas Mitzayra, and we'll return Be'ezer Hashem in the end to Parshas Achrimais. You'll see why I found these psukim to be very profound in light of the discussion in Parshas Mitzorah. But let's go back to Parshas Mitzorah. In Parshas Mitzorah, it discusses an inyan that we've talked about over previous years in one mahalach, and I want to share with you now a completely fresh approach to a parsha that we've learned before, and that is by Ravi in Mitzorah. It says, "Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe v'el Aaron lemar." Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, "Ki savoyu al Eretz Canaan, when you come into Eretz Canaan, asher ani noisein lochem la'achuza, that I am giving you as an achuza, v'nosati nega tzara'as beveis Eretz achuzastem, I will place a nega, I will place tzara'as in your homes." Okay, so Rashi says, famous Rashi, which we've learned in this shul many times, that it seems to be information. It's not saying maybe there'll be tzara'as, but it's informing you that there will be tzara'as, and therefore Rashi says besurahi. Rashi says that it's informing them. It's news that this is what's going to happen. Besurahi lahem shahanegoyim boyim aleim, that they're going to have negoyim in their homes. And Rashi goes on to say, the Medrash says, Lefi shehitminu emoiriim matmoinios shel zov bekiros batayim. The emoiriim, the Shiva Amimim, they hid treasures of gold in the walls of their house. Kol arboim shana sho Yisrael b'midbar, during the duration of the time that Klal Yisrael were wandering in the Midbar. V'al yidei hanega nutat tzabayis, through the nega, the halacha is when you have a tzara'as, you have to chip away that area of the wall, so then they would discover the gold that was inside the house. Now, this is something that really, really, really needs to be understood, because tzara'as is a terrible tumah. It's not a good thing. It's not something that anybody wants. In fact, I would suggest that true tzaddikim, if you tell them, I have a great idea, you'll have tzara'as, and then you'll find a treasure. I would venture to say that tzaddikim would say, I'm moichel the treasure. Just don't give me tzara'as. We're not here to find treasures. It's about our relationship with the Rabbeinu Shalom. A nega represents a mechitza between a person and Hashem. That's not something that a person wants. So what does it mean that it's a besura, that they'll have negoim and then they'll find treasures? What's going on over here? And also, Dr. Shear, your ha'ara in Parshas Achrimos, in a different sense, even jumps out more over here in Pasuk Lamed Daled, where it says, Ki savoyu el Eretz Canaan asher ani noisen lachem la'achuza. It doesn't even seem to have anything to do with the Canaan part of Eretz Canaan. It could have just said, Ki savayu el ha'aretz asher ani noisen lachem la'achuza. When you come into the land that I'm giving to you as an inheritance, as it says in many psukim, beginning of Parshas Ki Sava, it doesn't say Canaan. Why does it mention Canaan here? I want to share with you now a more subtle diuk in these psukim that indicates that there's something going on beneath the surface. And that is that this parsha is introduced with the words Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe v'el Aaron lemar. Hashem spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying, and based on the way that the Torah speaks most of the time, not all the time, but the overwhelming majority of the time, it should have said Dabru el b'nei Yisrael v'yamarta aleim. It should have said Hashem spoke to Moshe and said, or Moshe and Aaron, and said, speak to Klal Yisrael and tell them this parsha. But it doesn't say that. It just says Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe el Aaron lemar, and it just starts saying the parsha uniquely. So many years ago, I was listening to my Rosh Hashiva speak, and he was talking about the parsha that we lane on Yantif of Shor Kesev Eiz Ki Yivoled Shagafayim, right? So the din of V'haya Shivas Yamim Tachasimayim Yom Hashmini V'holo Yiratze, and so on. And over there also it says Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemar Shorei Kesef Vayez. It doesn't say Daber el Bnei Yisrael. And over there in that parsha, there are many other, because there's a lot of different parshas there, but all of them says Daber el Bnei Yisrael except this one. So I'm not going to tell you what he said about that parsha, but that's where I learned to look for this. And the Ramban over here, the Ramban is Meir, the Ramban points it out over here that it's missing. And the Ramban gives two possibilities of what it means. One is taka, that it wasn't immediately told to Klal Yisrael. But the first pshat the Ramban says is that of course it was told to Klal Yisrael, it just doesn't say it in the pasuk. So, but one has to understand that. Usually it does say that in the pasuk. Why would it leave it out over here? So the Rosh Hashiva said when he was teaching us the parsha of Sharei Kesavai Eiz, he said the following. He said that when Moshe Rabbeinu taught Torah to Klal Yisrael, there were two steps. There was the step of HaKadosh Baruch Hu teaching the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu, and then Moshe in turn telling it over to Klal Yisrael. He said the Torah could discuss the parsha in the context of teach this to Klal Yisrael, or it could discuss the parsha in the context of this is what I'm teaching you, Moshe. He says the more pneumistic, the more nistar the parsha represents, the more that the inyanim of the parsha are more internal and beneath the surface, the more likely it is that we wouldn't say speak to the people and tell them, because we would try when something is more nistar to relate to the Torah in a more hidden way. So we would accentuate the part of the process that's the hidden part of the process, even though both things took place. But since this Torah is Tzara'as, a Torah of Pnimius, so the Torah would choose the Pnimiustic part of the process to be madgish, to accentuate. Fascinating. So I want to keep that in mind as I examine this parsha of Nig'ei Batim. There's a style, a lot of times in the Gemara, that the Gemara will say a drasha, and the Gemara will say, this is true in Torah, in Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. Right? Sometimes it says that. You can find this pasuk in Torah, in Nevi'im, and in Ksuvim. So I want to share with you a inyan that's in Torah. I discovered this myself, that it's in Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. There's a Yeshua over there. You see there's a set of Nach, over, to the left, left, down a shelf, right there, there's a set of Nach, the first one on the right. Not there, no, the first one of this set, keep going, by your finger, by your hand, no, over, right, there it is. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So let me share with you an inyan that you find in Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim, but just for the sake of being able to give it over smoothly, I'm going to do Ksuvim, Nevi'im, and Torah instead of Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. Okay? Let's start with Ksuvim. Tehillim, Sefer Tehillim. Kapitel Kuf Hey. In the end of Kapitel Kuf Hey, not a short kapitel, it says, Vayitein lohem artzois goyim, and he gave them the lands of the nations, Va'amal le'umim yirashu, and the toil of the nations they inherited, the work of the nations. Interesting. Not just that they inherited the land of the nations, but that they inherited the work, the toil of the nations. What is this referring to? This is referring to what Yeshua told Klal Yisrael in the end of Sefer Yeshua about them inheriting Eretz Yisrael. Perek Chaf Dalid, Pasuk Yud Gimel, that Hashem, that Yeshua says b'Shem Hashem, he says, Va'etein lachem Eretz, I gave you a land, asher lo yogata ba, you did not toil in it. The Urim and cities, asher lo v'nisem, that you did not build. Vateshu b'hem, and you lived in them. Krumim v'zeisim, vineyards and olive groves. Thank you. Excellent. Asher lo netatem, that you didn't plant. Atem oichlim, you are eating. So there seems to be an element, it's such a fascinating thing. I remember this from when we learned Yeshua, I remember us being so intrigued from this, that part of the Yerushas Ha'aretz is the fact that you came in and fields were planted and cities were built and homes were built and you just moved in. It was like a move-in condition. You know, Moshe, you looked for a house? It was move-in condition. The land, the country was move-in condition. Okay? And this pasuk in Yeshua, working my way backwards, is based on a pasuk in Va'eschanon Vav Yud. The pasuk says in Parshas Va'eschanon, V'hoyo ki yaviyacha Hashem Elokecha el ha'aretz asher nishba l'avosecha. And it will be, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring you into the land that He swore to your forefathers, LeAvraham, LeYitzchak, LeYaakov, Loseslach. Orim gedolos v'toivos, big and good cities, asher lo vanisa, that you did not build. Ubatim meleim kol tuv, and homes that are full of all goodness, asher loy milesa, that you did not fill. Ubayros chatzuvim, and dug bayros v'mayim, excavated, I think, based on Rashi. Asher loy chatzavta, that you didn't dig. Kromim v'zeisim, asher loy notata. Ve'ochalta v'savata, and you will eat and you will be satisfied. Once again, isn't that unbelievable? V'Torah b'neviim u'b'ksuvim. The idea that going into Eretz Yisrael is not just that you're going into Eretz Yisrael and you'll work the land, you'll get your hands dirty a little bit, and you'll build from the ground up a beautiful country. No. B'Torah b'neviim u'b'ksuvim, it's merames, or it's explicit, that the idea is you're going to come in and you're going to get a land that is in move-in condition. The Inyan here of coming into a land that's in move-in condition, l'chayra, that the idea is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in a certain sense, Klal Yisrael coming into Eretz Yisrael has echoes of Adam Arishon being brought into Gan Eden. L'mashal, there's a mimer in the Mamorei Pachad Yitzchak where he points out that when Adam was created, there were two separate inyanim. There was the Yetzira of Adam, the forming of Adam, and then there was the placement of Adam in Gan Eden. Two separate steps in the Yetzira of Adam. The Yetzira of Adam, and then his placement in Gan Eden. So too, says Rav Hutner, when Klal Yisrael was created, which Klal Yisrael Atem Kruyim Adam, we are Yerush, the mantle of Adam Arishon Kaidem Achet. When Klal Yisrael was created, you have Yitzias Mitzrayim. That's the Yitzira of the Adam. That's what formed Klal Yisrael. And then you have going into Eretz Yisrael, which was supposed to happen immediately. A couple of things got in the way, but going into Eretz Yisrael, which is the placement of Adam in his makom. Now, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu put Adam into Gan Eden, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we saw in the first Rashi in Parshas Azriah, that he was created Achar Kol Behem L'Chayev Ha'oif B'Masa Bereshis, and Chazal say, at least in some of the oifanim of the way that Chazal explain it, is that the idea was that the world was ready K'Shulchan Aruch Lefanav. It was a set table. It's a covet to Adam that he came in, and there's a difference when you come into a home that you're staying in. Sometimes you're a guest in a home and you come in and they're like, "Oh, we're so excited to see you. Okay, could you just give us another few minutes? We have to change the linens." Okay, Baruch Hashem, they're happy. He goes, "What?" Right, exactly. So that's the when you go in and everything is muchan beforehand. That's a covet. Exactly, that's the way Shabbos is. Shabbos is a dogma of that everything is set up before. Right, Kol malachtecha asuya. Everything is set up before. Klal Yisrael came into Eretz Yisrael, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's echoes of that the land is there. Not only the land is there, the food is there, the kromim, the zeisim. Not only the food is there, the bayros, the batim, the arim, everything is set up, it's move-in condition for my nation to come in and to serve me. Unbelievable. However, it's important to realize that there comes along with that a certain measure of sakana. And you see this measure of sakana, of danger, from the way that the psukim in Parshas Va'eschanan continue. When they say this thing, Batim Malayim Kol Tuv, I read Pasuk Yud and Pasuk Yud Aleph. Let's look at Pasuk Yud Beis. It says, He shomer lecha. Be careful. And the farshim on the psukim are madgish, that this is a continuation. This is not random. This is a continuation of the fact that you're being yoresh. He shomer lecha pen tishkach es Hashem asher hotziacha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeis avodim. Maybe you'll forget Hashem who took you out of Mitzrayim mibeis avodim. What does that mean? Why are you suddenly afraid that I'm going to forget Hashem? So some learn because when you get a lot without working for it, that could lead to forgetting Hashem. But if you think about it, there's an element here that could be, and if you think about the way we do things, that be'etzim there would be a tremendous milah in actually building the houses. Because when we build something, and when we plant something, and when we stock a house, batim maleim kol tov, we have a certain intention. And the intentions that we have, the kavanos that we have, become part of the building. Right? They become part of the spiritual makeup of those buildings. What would you rather, live in a house that was built by some Polish guy or Russian guy and the Chafetz Chaim moved into it, or live in a house that the Chafetz Chaim built himself? I could see both of them going for millions of dollars, but I see the one the Chafetz Chaim built himself going for a lot more. He built it himself. He was mamish, miyached yichudim al kol, even ve'even, like it says about Chanoich, miyached yichudim. There's something about the kavanos when you do something, and I'm not trying to sound Kabbalistic. It's a very simple thing that the intentions, they prepare something for its tafkid. There's a certain kedusha in the way it's made. But we did not have that. L'ma'al Yusa, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Eretz Yisrael to be ready for us, but He's counting on us to see beneath the surface. He's counting on us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is counting on us, that we will not be brought astray from the fact that these homes were created just to serve themselves. These fields were built just to indulge in their own pleasures. These bayros were dug just so they could have an enjoyable Yishmaka life. And that's not our kavana. We dig bayros and plant fields and build homes so that we can have a place to serve Hashem. And that's truly why those things were built, by the way. Yeah, maybe the builder thought he was building it for himself. But we know why he was building it. He was building it because one day you and I are going to move into those houses. That's the true reason. But are we going to get fooled by the surface intention? Or are we going to be able to be yored to the pnimius of what's happening here, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu prepared these mekayimos for us to serve Him? And that's why after it describes all these homes and places and everything that you did, that were created, that were built by the Canaanim, it says, Hishomer lecha pen tishkach Hashem asher hotziacha me'eretz Mitzrayim. Hashem took you out of Eretz Mitzrayim. You're living a different life now. Now you're living a life of avodas Hashem. Make sure, even when you move into these Goyesha homes, make sure that you remember that. So I want to humbly suggest, that in Parshas Mitzorah, the Torah tells us that you're going to come into Eretz Yisrael, and you're going to, it doesn't just say Eretz Yisrael, it says you're going to come into Eretz Canaan. It didn't have to say Eretz Canaan, but it says you're going to come into Eretz Canaan because that's the sakana, that it's Eretz Canaan. It's a place of the Canaanim. And I'm going to put a neged Tzara'as in your homes. There are going to be times that you're going to miss it. You're not going to be using your home properly. You're not going to be valuing that your home is here as a place to serve Hashem. And you're going to get lost in the external kavanos of the builders of these homes without fully appreciating that HaKadosh Baruch Hu on a silver platter is handing you places within which to serve Him. So v'nosati nega tzara'as, and nega, as I said before, represents a separation. Just like oineg, which is the opposite of nega, represents the ultimate connection to Hashem, nega represents the ultimate pirud from Hashem. Ein lamayla mi nega, ein lamayla mi oineg, ein lamata mi nega. So the nega is going to come to teach you that you haven't gone deep enough. But then you're going to go through the process of being metaher from the nega. And we're going to chip away the nega. And you're going to find the gold and silver inside. And that's merames, that you're going to find the true kavana. You're going to find the true pnimius with that it was intended for. And that's the pshat and what's going on in the parsha of... That's what's going on in the parsha of Tzara'as Habayis. And that's why I began with those psukim. I told you I was going to trick you, but that's why I began with the psukim in Parshas Achrei Mos, that when you're going into Eretz Yisrael, to Eretz Canaan, we're afraid it might trigger some Eretz Mitzrayim memories. K'maisei Eretz Mitzrayim asher yeshavtim ba, u'k'maisei Eretz Canaan, because when we came out of Eretz Mitzrayim, we went through a process of being mitaher from living in Mitzrayim, and not only that, but we emptied out Mitzrayim. Right? We emptied out Mitzrayim, and we were able to take all of the gold and silver and treasures of Mitzrayim out. You think that gold was intended to be in the Mishkan when the Mitzrayim made the gold? The answer is no, but also the answer is yes. Because the Mitzrayim thought they were going to use it for their Avodah Zarah or their Taivas. But the truth is that the intention was that one day it's going to say, V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'seicham. So you left Eretz Mitzrayim and you learned how to mine even the physical things of Mitzrayim to use for Kedusha. Be careful when you go into Eretz Yisrael, into another land where you're going into a land that was used for Avodah Zarah, was used for all kinds of Averas, that you don't get lost in that external temporary existence, and that you find the Pnimius, you find the Matmainiyos Shelzav that are Bifnim. And what a lesson this is to us, because we tend sometimes to think of ourselves as individuals, and we happen to live in houses. Because we're not going to live on the street, so we live in houses. But you see from the fact that there's negayim on a person, there's negayim on his clothing, there's negayim on his house. And you see from the fact that there's a hadgasha here about the bias, or a dinim of a bias, that there's a chashivas to us as people in our avodas Hashem, but there's also something to say about a home, that a home has a certain value, a home has a certain ruach to it. A home is a makom dedicated for Avodas Hashem as a home, as a bias. I'll never forget when we moved to Waterbury about a year later. A chaver of mine came from Eretz Yisrael, who had been in my house in Eretz Yisrael many times, but he came to visit me in Waterbury, and he walked into my house and he was like, "It feels like Eretz Yisrael." And to me, there was nothing more important than to hear that. And I just davened to Hashem. I just hope that if he would walk into my house today, he would say the same thing, because he's still in Eretz Yisrael. I hope that he would say the same thing. But to recognize that and that means, what does that mean? That means that our homes are places of simcha. That means that our homes are places of gentleness. That means that we try to learn Torah in our homes. It's beautiful to learn Torah in a beis medrash. But like sometimes I have to teach young talmidim that learning Torah by your dining room table with a baby on your lap, I don't even think that's Olam Hazeh. That's the Kabbalah Schar. That's not the Avodah. That's the Kabbalah Schar. What greater thing is there than that? So that there should be divrei Torah that are nishma'im in our house balayla, like Chazal say. That we should be able to learn Torah in the home, and that our homes should be places of Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasadim, and we should be Zeicher, even here in Chutz La'aretz, for the time that we're here, to make sure that we're in touch with the Matmainiyos Shalzav behind the walls, and not to get distracted from the externals of the world that we live in. Yashkayach.
So Samus has a twist.